Right. Hello, everyone. Hi, Ollie.
Hi, Marcos. Nice to see you again. So, what are we doing today?
Likewise, we are doing Mars in the fixed signs because
Excellent.
we did a video last time, which if anyone hasn't seen, please go and check that out about Mars. Um, so this time we'll be looking at Mars in the fixed signs. So that's uh, I thought we might concentrate on Mars in transit, but this would also apply if somebody has Mars in any of those signs natally, I guess. Um,
Right.
and with respect, and we'll talk a little bit about how it would affect each of the other four. I suppose we should start by defining what I mean by fixed signs.
Yeah. I mean, we have done this for other people, but if you're new to the podcast and possibly new to astrology,
Yes, welcome. Hello. Yes.
nice to see you. The fixed signs are I've got to get it right now.
Yeah.
Are Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, and Aquarius, and they are respectively earth, fire, water, and air are their rulers. And the signs can have be of three types, which is cardinal, fixed, and mutable. And cardinal signs are the one where the energy is sort of gushing forth. It's new, and then it's the fixed signs does what it says on a tin. It's fixed in place, so much more settled energy. And then the mutable signs are when that energy has started to be on the wane. It could be strong, it could be weak. It's basically all over the place. Is that right?
Perfect. Yeah, and the tropical astrology, which is what we use in so-called Western astrology, is really seasonal in its origin. So it's fixed to the solstices, and the equinoxes. So solstices and equinox always begin the seasons. So the first third of the season is always a cardinal sign, and the fixed signs are the middle third of the season, basically. So Taurus traditionally was spring, Leo is summer, Scorpio is autumn, and Aquarius is winter. So in the northern hemisphere, in the southern hemisphere, those flip unless you use the so-called southern tropical zodiac, and we have a video on that.
Let's not go there tonight. We've
Well,
only
I
got half an
would like
hour.
to plug that video. There's a couple of videos we did called Flipping the Zodiac, so go and check those.
Which are great, which I really do recommend. Yes.
Yes, they're
Blow your
very
mind.
interesting.
Yes.
Nathan Naker, fascinating astrologer. We had a good chat with him. Anyway, so Mars in the fixed signs. Should we start with which sign should we start with?
Well, I'm just thinking because where's Mars is in Leo
Mars
at
is
the
in
moment.
Leo right
So
now.
why don't we start with Leo as it's kind of, and so yeah. So Marcos, I mean, obviously this is going to apply to more people more who have planets in Leo and they're ascending in
Yeah,
Leo.
shall I start? Shall I model Mars in Leo, and then
Yes,
do you
yeah,
want to
and you
take
do the
Scorpio,
next
and we'll
one. But
just
I'm just
alternate?
so for the viewers and listeners, say follow along and look at their charts, and particularly like so they can see where their planets are and which ones might be
Exactly,
affected by this.
exactly. Well, so on the most basic level, if you are a Leo star sign, like your zodiac sign is Leo, that means you're born somewhere with the sun in Leo. So you're probably born, if you're using Western astrology, somewhere between the 21st or 22nd of July and the 21st, 22nd of August. So your sun will be somewhere in tropical Leo. So Mars going into Leo means that for the whole time Mars is going through Leo, you'll be getting a little flavor of Mars, and then there'll be maybe a week or so when you'll be getting a really strong flavor of Mars, because when Mars is actually close to the degree where your sun where your sun was when you were born, sort of thing. So, what might that feel like? Mars transits are always going to be about agitation, activation, energization. On a medical level, they can be about inflammation or infection or injury, the three I's: inflammation, infection, injury. But on more positively, they can just be about getting stuff done. It can also be about emotionally anger, but more positively, motivation. And we mentioned last time that it's more likely, all else being equal, if you were born at night, that Mars is going to be a bit more on the positive side. And if you're born during the day, Mars may err a little more on the problematic side. But there are other factors, but we won't, we'll make this podcast 3 hours long, so we'll just keep to that basic for now. So while Mars is going through Leo, if you're a Leo sun sign, you may have noticed that I think it went into Leo. Was it about a week ago now, Ollie? Something like that?
Yeah, sounds about
It
right.
doesn't matter because this is going to be on the internet for perpetuity. So
Yeah.
at any time Mars goes into Leo, if you're Sun Leo, you might notice that around the time it goes into sign, wherever your sun is in Leo, wherever your sun sits at the beginning or end of the sign, you may notice immediately something happens which is either irritating or energizing or activating in some way, depending, again, born day or night. Now, sun in Leo, Leo is the sign which represents the heart. The sun rules the heart. So on the most negative level, most extreme, this could be a heart attack. For most people, it won't be a heart attack, but there might be things on a physical level like potentially chest pain or palpitations, or you might just get into a really strong exercise routine where you're doing a lot of cardio. It could literally be that simple. It doesn't have to be a medical disaster. Again, it all depends. The other thing, the sun in Leo, because Mars in Leo, I'm thinking about it, represents the heart, because Leo represents the heart, and Mars rules the sign Aries, and Leo is the fifth sign from Aries, which in medical astrology represents the heart. But Mars rules the other sign, and Mars rules traditionally is Scorpio, and Leo is the 10th sign from Scorpio. So a bit weirdly, if you're not familiar with this system, Mars in Leo can also represent the knees. So for some people, some Leo types, when Mars is in Leo, in addition to the heart, or instead of, there could be problems with the knees, which is a bit interesting. But generally speaking, Mars, because the sun is so strong in Leo, for most Leo types, Mars will just be activating to that sun. So they'll either feel irritated or energized or both. And for some, there may be infections or injuries. Or what.
A good question, because I'm wondering, as the heart is the main pump of the blood in the body, yeah, and if the heart gets stressed, could it lead to things like high blood pressure, stuff like that, which is linked to irritation and things as well?
That's a really interesting one. Definitely stuff to do with hypertension. But although I often find with hypertension, there's usually a Sun Jupiter involved.
Oh, okay, that explains
like a hard aspect, because Jupiter rules the blood. And
yes.
Sun is the heart, so I find Sun Jupiter hard aspects are often that. But for sure, it's more, Mars is more the inflammatory signature. So certainly it could temporarily spike the blood pressure through adrenaline and that sort of thing.
And I was also wondering about, presumably Mars rules stress as well, because it's like, and like stress is particularly myself, major contributor to blood pressure. So
absolutely, no, you're 100% right, Ollie. And the other thing to say is both the planets involved here, Sun and Mars, and the sign are traditionally masculine or yang. So there could literally be challenging encounters with male figures or figures with strong or authority figures type stuff, like literally getting potentially into fights with your boss or stuff like that, if we're being really generic about it. We were also going to mention just in passing, so everybody knows their star sign, just about everybody, but if you know a little bit more about astrology and you know the sign of your moon, then that can be interesting. So moon Mars, again, if your moon's in Leo, that could be heart sensitivity, because the moon sensitizes whatever body part it's in. But also the moon in Leo, if we're using that traditional thing, could represent the throat, because it's the second sign from Cancer, analogous to Taurus. And the moon Leo is a bit different. That could be, you might have angry interactions with women, or it could just be maybe that you've got a load of crazy stuff going on with your home and your family. Maybe everybody's getting exceptionally dramatic in your family. People are having meltdowns and slamming doors and stuff like that. That kind of stuff could happen. And just to briefly talk about the other three fixed signs, if Mars is in Leo, as it is as we're filming this now. So if somebody was a zodiac sign Scorpio, I would say Mars in Leo is in a way the most favorable to those people, because even though it's in an overcoming square, meaning it's in a sign which squares, is in a stressful relationship, the sun is in Scorpio would be ruled by Mars traditionally, and Mars in Leo is ruled by the sun. So there's what's called a mutual reception or generosity between those two planets. So the way that can sometimes work out is while there may be challenging interactions with authority figures, or you might be embarking on some crazy new stressful experience or an exercise regime or whatever, the outcome of it may be more skewed towards the positive.
Yes.
Or if there is a medical event, the medical event may serve as a springboard to better health or to something. So it's the formula here is stress leading to potentially more positive results. And if somebody's got the sun in Scorpio, then that may Scorpio is the fourth sign from Leo, so that may, in addition to the usual heart stuff which can arise with the Sun and Mars, there might be stuff like issues with the stomach or lungs, while Mars is in Leo, because Scorpio is the fourth sign from Leo, which the Sun rules. And if the Moon was in Scorpio, again, there might be bowel stuff, because the Moon and Scorpio both rule the bowel. The Moon in Scorpio, people who have the Moon in Scorpio, it's not such a great outcome. It's still not terrible because Mars rules the Moon, but it might be a little bit more like there might be some digestive upsets, or in female-bodied people, it can sometimes be endometriosis or just period pains, so gynae stuff with pain.
But that's what getting, I mean, because it's, if we then move round to the next fixed sign from Leo, which is, of course, is Scorpio, a lot of that would be true of Mars in Scorpio as well.
Yes,
if you've got
absolutely.
your Sun or your Moon, indeed, in Scorpio. Because just to reverse a little bit, because a square is 90 degree, is a 90-degree aspect of two signs, effectively, whenever Mars moves into a fixed house, it's going to square all the other three fixed houses as well.
Yes,
so
we didn't say
that's
exactly right.
if you happen to have a planet in each of the fixed signs, it's going to affect them all. So
yes.
That's unusual, but it might affect them in a good way, of course. I mean, the thing about Mars in Scorpio, it's very, very happy, because I think it's got it's got a couple of extra. It's got triplicity as well, isn't it? And
yeah, it is. It's in its own sign. It's in triplicity. It's in its joy. Let me just finish the two other.
Oh, sorry.
From Leo, but no, it's great, Ollie. I'm glad you've pointed that out.
It's just we will come round to them.
Yes, it's important to mention. I mean, we will, because we'll take less and less time with each sign, because we'll cover other bits of them while we go sort of thing. So when Mars is in Leo, we talked a bit about it's not so negative for Sun Scorpio, might be a bit more tricky for Moon Scorpio people. It causes a more emotional upset for Moon Scorpio people, but again, it will tend to be digested ultimately and handled because of the what's called reception, because Mars is rulership of Scorpio. So Mars is sort of duty bound to look after things in the sign that it rules, sort of thing. But it's the aspect is a square, as you say, Ollie. It's a stressful aspect. Squares and oppositions are stressful aspects. For people who are zodiac sign Aquarius, that's probably the trickiest for Mars in Leo. It can just tend to produce the usual things that we've mentioned a little bit, with sort of problems with other males or authority figures, or if you are a boss, it can produce some challenges to that role. You just have to kind of probably do a little bit of anger management and breathing exercises while Mars is going through that sign. I know that you're a double Aquarius, Ollie, so I'm sure.
It's all happening.
Yes, but it's not. I mean, it's a transient thing. If it's and the thing is here, because Mars is in Leo, if you're a zodiac sign Aquarius, if you're a sun sign, any of these things, there's always going to be reception by the sun. So there's some degree of mitigation here, because Leo is ruled by the sun.
Of course, yes, yeah.
In sun sign Aquarius's issues may arise with, in addition to the usual Leo stuff like the heart, whatever, the heart or the back. We've got to mention the back is also Leo, so the middle. Yes. The sort of middle of the back, the thoracic
spine,
in Aquarius, the sun in Aquarius also has some rulership over the general circulation, and weirdly over the lower back and the kidneys, because it's the seventh sign. Leo, and the moon in Aquarius could be the bowel and also the lower legs. Finally, because the moon sensitizes whatever.
Whatever's in.
I know you're ahead of me. And then last one is Taurus. And I think for those peeps with the sun in Taurus zodiac sign people, this Mars transit may be the trickiest, because there is a partial rejection from Taurus, even though the aspect, the opposition to Sun in Aquarius, oppositions are a more forcible aspect. Anything in Taurus, Mars does not like, because it's Taurus is ruled by Venus, which is Mars's opposite.
Yes.
So it tends to me, what that means to me is that Taurian folks may tend to resist Mars more, because the modus operandi of Taurus is to live a gentle and comfortable life.
Yeah.
The modus operandi of Mars is to kick away everything that gives you a gentle and comfortable life and make you do stuff that you don't want to do as quickly as possible. So it's potentially a bit of a problem. Physically, that can manifest as issues with Sun in Taurus is that's the 10th sign for Taurus. So again, that could be the knees as well as the heart stuff that we've already mentioned. And the moon in Taurus, that's an interesting one because the moon is super strong in Taurus, could be the neck or throat, and it could also be the lower legs, interestingly.
Right.
Cancer, and Taurus is the 11th sign from Cancer. So anyway, a bit random. But again, the signature of all of the Sun Mars and Moon Mars things are going to be similar in that Sun Mars is going to be issues with authority figures, issues with being an authority, issues with men, heart stuff. With the moon, it's going to be more family stuff, more emotional upsets, stuff to do with the home, potentially, generically. With those different inflections as to how manageable the stress is, whether it skews towards the positive, is going to be inflected by the sign, and the body parts and where things can show up. All right. So now you started with Mars in Scorpio. So
just, I mean, and as Michael said, we've been through a lot of this stuff already. But it's, from a medical herbalism point of view for astrology, I mean, I think just things to look out for any aspect or any planets in Scorpio. Is obviously Mars is ruling part of the genitalia. It's one of its main things. So infections in those regions of the body, which could be, I guess it could be a urinary infection, couldn't it? It could be venereal diseases would fall under this as well.
All the nether bits, isn't it?
So all the nether bits. So any sort
genitalia, prostate in men, bladder, men and women, the womb in women, the colon in men and women.
So the device is there, be extra, if you're prone to, for instance, UTIs, be extra careful when you've got those transits, because you're going to be, it's going to be more likely you'll pick them up if you're not careful. And I think this is a lot of the way that how this sort of transit advice works. You don't have to worry, oh my God, I'm going to get an infection. It's like, no, you've got to be more careful not to get infected. This is where you start drinking more liquids and et cetera, and taking all those precautions not to get a UTI, and don't go out on the lash and don't drink water, et cetera. But
exactly, we haven't really talked about remediation. We've just delivered a little dose of fear. So I'm glad you brought that up, Ollie, because that's the whole point of doing this stuff, is that you can sort of see. As Deb Holding, wonderful astrologer, says, you can see when it's raining, so you need to bring an umbrella.
And I mean, from a personal point of view, I suffer from hypertension, but purely from a nervous point of view. If my stress levels get too high, because my blood pressure is all over the place. But I notice in these Mars transits and and its opposition my sun, and we're coming to opposition my sun, my stress levels always rise. That increases my blood pressure. And so again, remedial, it's like, okay, let's start taking some valerian and some passion flower, etc.
There's a point, Ollie. I've just thought, do you not also have Jupiter in a fixed sign?
I do, in Taurus.
You have a whole sign square from Jupiter as well.
Yes, so indeed.
That combo. Yeah.
Yes, and the blood pressure, of course, because it'll be affecting the Jupiter as well. And so just on remediation, so I'm extra careful. I can feel the stress. But you think, okay, I'm going to try and not get into any arguments, not do this, take the herbs, and usually, and I get through up to life. So
at the very least, it can take the edge off.
Exactly.
And, at best, you can avoid most of the issues that may otherwise have arisen.
And I think this is very useful because it just gives you a warning, like, yes, I'm prone to hypertension if I get stressed. but this is a reminder, like I'm likely to get stressed now, so let's be extra vigilant, sort of thing. And I like that, because otherwise it's like, oh, am I going to get high blood pressure? Can I do this? Can I do that? I'm getting stressed like the whole bloody time. So this is like points where
Yes.
you be extra careful. I don't know if that makes sense, but
Yeah, no, totally. It's you can see when it's almost as if, like, to make a very sort of plunky and slightly stupid analogy, it's almost like if you're treating yourself like a boiler where you've got a little pressure gauge on the front,
yes,
and you can see when the gauge is in the green and you've got plenty of wiggle room,
exactly.
and when the gauge is going into the red, so you're like, right, I just need to let a bit of air out the system, turn off the pump for a couple of minutes and just let
Yes.
it relax, you know. So it's that. Yeah, so I love that, Ollie. And you know, just we won't go into detail with this. We might do some other videos in future about remediation in a lot more detail.
Yes.
In fact, I'm sure we will. But you know, some of the traditional antidotes to Mars anywhere were symbolically its opposite planets, Venus or the
Yes.
moon. So as
Yes.
you were saying, Ollie, it's stuff like moon would be cooling down, fluids.
Yes.
You know, it's anything symbolically to do with the moon is cool. Both of them are cool and moist and relaxing, and
Yes.
about security and relaxation.
Yes.
But there are two ways of going here, because you can do a little bit of, depending how constructive Mars is, you can do a bit of homeopathy in a sense here and use the Mars as in, because sometimes the best way to get rid of Mars is much as if you're feeling really, really stressed. If you move a bit and do some exercise,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
off that tap, so your cortisol levels go down and the adrenaline goes down because
Yes.
you've burnt it off. So it's whatever makes sense in the context of the real life situation is your best guide. There's lots of clues from the astrology, but the TLDR is if you have a violent fever, then you're probably going to want to take cooling remedies.
Yep.
If, on the other hand, you're stuck in the office and you're wanting to throw your computer out the window because you received a crappy email from some person who's driving you nuts, then it might just be best to go out and go for a brisk walk. You know, use the Mars energy to diffuse it a little bit. But it's a combination of being out in nature, which is very moon, or Venus, go for a swim, something like that. So you've got the water, but then so just common sense.
That's
here.
nice. That's nice. Brilliant. Shall we move on to Aquarius now?
Yes, yeah. Well, briefly, I think we've discussed Mars.
We've done most of Aquarius already.
I want to just briefly say which will help or hurt. Do you want to say that, or?
Sorry, missed that, Marcos.
Well, Mars is going. Which zodiac signs will it help or hurt most? I mean,
Mars in Scorpio. Okay, so we're back to obviously the Leo. It's not going to be too bad on because
no.
It's got the mutual.
But also, don't forget, as you mentioned, Mars is really dignified in Scorpio.
Exactly.
That doesn't mean it's still a malefic. It's still a naughty planet, so it still cause issues. But
it's more likely to be able to be used constructively.
Yes.
And again, this is when we come back to remediation. This is something probably we'll discuss. Like, you know, can one channel planetary energy to take, you know, so in a good way.
Yeah.
Again. Aquarius is not going to be so hot for it. There's not much. But again, the worst one obviously is going to be Taurus, isn't it?
Because yes, definitely.
Definitely. They've got nothing in common. They hate each other, and yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, it's opposition without
opposition. So it's a. So,
yeah. I mean, the good thing about Mars in Scorpio is because it's in its own sign. It can be it's more powerful, but it's also not on its worst behavior. The malefics tend to behave a bit more badly. They still produce negatives because that's their nature. They produce, rather than saying negatives, I'll say produce challenges. Saturn produces obstacles, Mars produces challenges. That's probably the best way to put it.
That sounds good, yeah.
Either way, but yeah, I like that. So do you want to take Aquarius as well, seeing as that's your sign?
Yeah, Aquarius. Okay, well, you know, we've got the lower leg here, which seems to be cropping up all over the place. Now, I'm just thinking, well, obviously breakages would be a Mars thing. I think a lot of the lower leg things like Venus return problems would be more properly coming under Saturn. But you'd look out for things like ulceration in older people and stuff like that, which the ulcers becoming inflamed and things like that. I know my father had terrible problems in his 80s with inflamed ulcers on his lower leg.
Definitely.
Twisted ankles would be another one.
Ulcers or lower leg vascular disease or anything like that.
And if you have a problem, for instance, with weak ankles, be extra
Phlebitis. Oh yeah,
not to twist your ankle, sort of thing. But I mean, it sounds silly, but absolutely, that's a classic Mars thing, is a twisted ankle. No, I'm just trying to work out. I'm very bad at doing this without a bit of paper.
I think it's the fourth sign from Scorpio. Fourth sign.
Fourth sign. So that would be the equivalent of Gemini.
No, Cancer.
Cancer.
Nah.
I'm hopeless without looking.
Yeah, I know. That's why Lily has a table.
I love Lily's table. I should learn to do it in my head. But anyway. So obviously Cancer is ruling things like the stomach and the womb, obviously, as well. So you should look out for things like, stomach aches, problems, issues with the womb, endometriosis again, stuff like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, but if you have issues in these areas, like ongoing issues, it's a time they might well get worse if you suffer from things like inflammation, etc. Anyway, on a periodic basis in those areas.
So as you were just saying, Ollie, as we were both just talking about, if you do have any of these issues, or if you have strong placements in the fixed signs, then it's just like knowing that a Mars transit is going on. Just don't do anything that is going to aggravate stuff.
Yeah.
Or
exactly.
take a few evasive measures, particularly when it's within a few degrees of exact, if you know your astrology. And if you don't, if you just think, well, I'm that sun sign or that's my zodiac sign, then just be aware of it. It's a good, and if anything else, it's a really good learning tool.
Absolutely, yes. Anything else on Aquarius?
I mention the moon in Aquarius for anyone who knows that they have the moon in Aquarius. I guess it would, just trying to think of that again, lower legs, but also moon in Aquarius. What degree? Where's that from Cancer? Is that the 8th? Is that the Oh God. Cancer, opposite Cancer is Capricorn, and then it's Aquarius. Yes, it's the 8th.
It's
so
the 8th.
Bowel, womb. So you mentioned it.
Yeah, back to Scorpio again. Yeah. So it's all the Scorpio issues again.
Yes. So if you've got Mars transiting Aquarius, it could aggravate those sort of bowel, bladder issues. If you've got Moon in Aquarius. For the other signs, for Taurus, again, it would be a bit challenging, particularly challenging, I think, because Mars in Aquarius, it's in the sign of the sun's detriment.
Oh, yes.
The sun in Taurus would be the sign of Mars's detriment. So they have what I call mutual rejection or hostility, where both planets, so sun in Taurus is going to reject Mars in Aquarius, and Mars in Aquarius is going to reject the sun in Taurus. So what that will tend to mean is that there may be, if for people who are Taurians, zodiac Taurians, at some point while Mars is transiting Aquarius, there may be problems with the Taurus bits or the Aquarius bits, the lower legs or the neck and throat, but also, as we mentioned before, the sun in Taurus is likely associated with the knees and the sort of hamstrings, those bits, legs. And Mars in Aquarius, I think you've just talked about, Ollie, is going to be related to the stomach and lungs as well. So
lungs too, yes.
And infections in the blood as well as lower legs, blah, blah, blah. So, but that it could be particularly stressful for Taurian suns, for Taurian moons, a bit less so, but similar physical afflictions, I think, potentially, or exacerbations of existing conditions. One thing I'd like to say in passing, we've kind of both alluded to this in a way, but indirectly, is one of the things I say about illness all the time is whatever gets pushed down from the top comes out of the sides. What I mean by that is if you have some ongoing source of emotional stress that you are either repressing or just can't deal with, and it goes on for long enough, it will express in a physical illness. I am not saying that all physical illness has its origins emotionally. I think things can go two ways. I think your physical stuff can result in emotional problems, and emotional problems can result in physical problems. But it's a well-recognized thing. It's a syndrome called Hans-Selye's general adaptation syndrome, where if chronic stress is continued for a while, it tends to result eventually in physical illness and breakdown. And so that's a physiologically recognized thing. So in terms of the astro gubbins, what you'll often find is if there've been some unaddressed emotional issues, or stuff going on in the background, these things can express as external events in the life just while the transit's going on. Like usually with Mars, it's some external source of stress, or there's something that just gives you extra work to do and things get really hectic, or all of that stuff. But the medical stuff can come up because whatever gets pushed down from the top comes out the sides. If the stuff that can't be processed or hasn't been processed or has just been going on for ages, that can emerge as an illness, which goes back to the remediation bit that you were saying, Ollie, really.
Yeah, absolutely.
And do you want to do Taurus things? I seem to have been hogging the mic also.
Okay, Taurus classically rules the throat. So, I mean, sore throat, tonsillitis, all those sorts of things would be a classic Taurian stuff. Losing your voice, thyroid issues could come up as well. I mean, if as a sort of getting worse for a while rather than just a chronic sort of thing. Taurus. What else does Taurus rule?
Again. Just a thought with Taurus, because it's really dry. Oh, it's not super dry, but it's a drier sign. Mars is dry.
Yeah,
so there might be a lot of sort of problems of dryness.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, some people like say Taurus rules some of the jaw as well. I don't know where you stand on this, Marcos.
I'm not really too fussed about exactly where the boundaries of the things lie, because I think it's symbolic.
Could say there might be some teeth issues, some inflammations there, etc., and tongue and stuff as well. I always think the tongue's quite a Taurian thing because, like, cows have.
Yeah, I think so. I think you can get teeth stuff with Aries because it rules the whole head, and you can get teeth stuff with Taurus because Taurus rules the throat and what you put in. So it can go either way.
And Marcos is now going to do the maths for us on other things in Taurus because
okay. Well, I mean, the other thing I wanted to briefly mention, Mars, when it's, as we said, in Scorpio, it's super dignified. In Taurus, it struggles because it's traditionally in its detriment. It's in the sign opposite.
Mars. Yes.
So it might potentially be a bit more problematic for health in general.
Definitely,
Taurus.
yes.
So as you mentioned, sort of neck and throat area, also traditionally, it would be the 7th sign from Scorpio. So that might be the lower back, the kidneys, and I would say the adrenals. Because
and they're ruled by Mars anyway, aren't they? So
I mean, obviously, the traditional astro people didn't know that the adrenals existed. They weren't an organ prior to modern medicine. But we're pretty sure that, as you said, the thyroid is probably a Marsy organ because it speeds up the metabolism. Most likely, the adrenals are too. I tend to think of Mars in Taurus or in Libra, which we maybe talk about next time, might have some relevance to adrenal issues.
Interesting. Too. Yes.
Yeah. So for sun in Taurus peeps, we've already covered a lot of the things that might emerge. It's a double throat or neck issue, neck signification, yada yada. Moon in Taurus, usual moon bits. So moon rules stomach and bowels and all that. But moon in Taurus, particularly, we mentioned also could be the lower legs. Essentially, problems can show up either in the parts of the body which Mars represents in the sign, or the parts of the body that the other planet it's interacting with represents in the sign, or a combination of the two.
Now, if your moon was in Taurus, Marcos, obviously that moon would be quite a strong moon.
It would.
The Mars is quite weak in Taurus. Would that mean it would be less? It would.
That's a really good point.
Less.
I suspect that's highly context dependent
on other.
If you're right though. If you were born with the moon in Taurus, it would depend how problematic I think your natal Mars was in your birth chart.
Yeah.
So if you were born at night and Mars didn't rule any of the naughty houses, as doesn't understand this astrology, don't worry, we'll unpick it in another episode. If Mars is less problem, if you're born at night, Mars doesn't rule the 6th, the 8th, or the 12th house, then perhaps that transit of Mars to the moon may just give you some of the usual Mars Moony stuff, like upsets with females, upsets at home, upsets with family, a bit of just emotional stress, a bit of a wobble. But it probably won't be so intense. If, on the other hand, your Mars rules the 6th house of illness in your birth chart, or the 8th house, which is potentially death, but more usually just stress, and the 12th house of problems you cause yourself, maybe you've gone out partying, you've been smoking a lot, or whatever, and it goes over your moon in Taurus, even though the moon is strong, it's more likely to produce more issues. But you are right, because the moon is so strong in Taurus. It's usually a good argument that Mars will be a more passing issue, unless there are other things that
Yeah.
exacerbate it. Interesting counterpoint to the moon in Scorpio, its opposite sign, where the moon is super debilitated. For anyone who has the moon in Scorpio, here we've got one of those really interesting cases where Mars in Taurus is more weak and debilitated, so it's generally more problematic. The moon is weak and debilitated, indicating that moon in Scorpio natives, people who are born with moon in Scorpio, have often found, not always, that again, particularly those born during the day, and depending where the moon is placed, yada yada, but more generally are a bit more prone to things like IBS or interstitial cystitis, or for females like menstrual pain, issues like that. So Mars going through Taurus may exacerbate those, but there's a mutual reception, because Mars in Taurus is in the sign of the moon's exaltation. The moon in Scorpio is in the sign of Mars's rulership. So they weirdly like each other, even though they're having a fight. So I think that sort of situation is a little bit like there's a transient flare up of something, but it probably won't amount to much more than a transient.
Right. Yeah, that makes
like
sense.
Issues and whatever that get resolved. It's sort of like messy and horrible for a few days, and then it sort of resolves itself.
Nice, like it.
It may weirdly, so that's an interesting one. So for people with the moon in Leo or the moon in Aquarius, that Mars in Taurus may be more of a problem, oddly, than it is either for people with the moon in Taurus or Scorpio. Yeah. So yeah, anyway, we haven't covered everything in great detail, but hopefully that little whistle stop gives you guys some ideas.
I think that's lots of food for thought there, definitely. And
yes, and we're both a little bit knackered this evening, so we're going to disappear into the night. And if you've enjoyed this, peeps, please do please do comment, leave us any comments on any of the things we've said today, whether positive or negative, and give us some feedback and some ideas for things to talk about, because they're always welcome.
Cheerio then, everybody. Until next time.
Thanks, Ollie. Brilliant.
Thanks, Marcos.